Wildcats, Big 12 champion Will Howard.
So excited to announce Kansas City Sports Network's new soccer channel. They're taking advantage of a look that they utilized earlier in the game to show the jet sweep motion.
It's a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise.
You kind of root for guys to have those moments, and that was certainly a big moment.
Welcome into Mizzou, that's really your podcast for Missouri Athletics here on KC Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to the Border War Podcast.
Welcome back, another episode of A No Season Podcast.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Breaking News Team as the Chiefs have made a splash in free agency. They have kicked it off. They have signed Irv Smith to a one-year deal, tied in via the Cincinnati Bengals coming from the Minnesota Vikings out of Alabama. The Breaking News Team today, we got Seth Kaiser, we got Dirk here with us. So Seth, how are we doing? How do we feel about this just right off the rip?
I just think that we can all relax now. This is the news we were all waiting for. They've signed an offensive weapon. I hear he's got a second round grade on him. Oh, is he not just coming out in the draft? That's what I know about Irv Smith by and large, other than watching him a little bit with Cincy last year. I like it. I like guys with potential when they were coming out that maybe didn't quite work out the way they were expected to. I like them almost as much as Brett Veach does. And it's a classic Veach move. Take a guy that you think has some talent, see what he can do. It's at an established position, so there's no pressure there. It's, hey, can you catch the ball a little bit better than Blake Bell did last year? If so, great. And then they can keep going with those 13 personnel looks that I keep waiting for them to find more iterations of. So I like it.
Dirk, what about you? What's your initial thoughts? You're hanging out, you see this come across. What did you think when you saw the Chiefs are bringing in Irv Smith for this one-year deal?
Well, I'm here to bring the veteran presence to the show. I was looking up Irv Smith Sr. stats because I remember him playing in the 90s. And his stats look pretty similar to his kids' stats here, about 300, 400 yards a year. Irv Smith, highly drafted, a little disappointing. I think anybody who's played fantasy over the last 3 or 4 years, he's always been like he's the sleeper tight end. Like he might be you can get him as if you don't have a tight end yet, real late in the draft him. And he's always disappointed a little bit. He's not that guy. So, but he's bringing here to be our fantasy sleeper. So hopefully he's better in this role.
Yeah, so let's see. Last year, Irv Smith signed a one-year deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. He played in, I believe, 12 of their 17 games. He kind of was in a rotation there behind a couple other guys. So he ended up with 18 receptions for 115 yards and one touchdown. That one touchdown, a big one against Jordan Poyer and the Buffalo Bills, right? Like, hey, we scored a nice touchdown. It was a nice little corner route. So he was trying to find his footing after moving on from the Vikings. I believe he has suffered a couple injuries with the Vikings where he was unable to play a full season his last 2 years there. I think Dirk kind of nailed it there. Here's a guy is a top 50 pick coming out of Alabama, all the hype in the world. He was going to be this next, weapon coming from this Nick Saban Alabama team, and he just never quite has found his footing so far in the NFL. But you see teams, good offenses are having interest in him. And I think, Seth, to your point, the Chiefs aren't bringing him in to be a tight end one. I don't even necessarily think they're bringing him in to be a tight end two. He's going to be competing with whether it's a return of Blake Bell, whether it's another tight end coming in to be a tight end three, so the Chiefs can get in this 13 personnel look, get a little bit more athletic. Is that kind of where we see him for this team?
That's absolutely where I would see him. To expect more from him would be a kind of a disservice to really looking at what someone's done throughout their career. It is interesting. A lot of tight ends are kind of slow developers in the league. Guys are usually in year 5, 6, 7. Travis Kelce's an exception. Certain other guys have been exceptions. But something about the tight end position seems to lead to late bloomers, as it were. So there's a chance, especially given the system that they've got here, that you could see him start to, rack up a few more stats. One thing he's a decent athlete. He was, like you said, in college, he was considered a weapon. He was going to come out, be one of those guys. They just miss, the NFL does, on tight ends as much early as any position. And I'm not sure what it is particularly about that position. Maybe it's because they're asked to do so many things. I don't know. But with Smith, I do think that he's got athleticism. I do like something that frustrated me last year. I like Blake Bell as a player. I love their 13 personnel groupings. I love the changeup it provides that leads into some of the under center play action stuff that Mahomes operates really well out of. I've always wanted to see more and more of that. But with Bell, the unfortunate result was every now and then they had to throw him the ball, and quite often that's just not who he is. You'd hope with Smith it would be a little bit different in terms of being a little more reliable as that third option, which then perhaps unlocks the occasional, a little more 13 personnel. The downside, you were talking about his stats from last year. I was looking at his snap count, and one thing I noticed is early in the year, he was seeing half the snaps, give or take, and then you saw that start to dwindle, and he eventually became a healthy scratch. That's less than encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just think about the fit. I look back at last year when we were all kind of trying to fix the offense a little bit, and the receivers were struggling as much as they were. And, one of the solutions that kept bouncing around my head was, lean into the tight ends, which I think they did. And they started doing that more as the season went on. But like Seth said, I don't think they fully trusted Blake Bell, and I just don't think he was quite a capable player. So I think it might just be a bit of an upgrade at that position. So maybe just lean more into those heavy tight end sets. And I think it kind of improved the offense. Then, they kind of simplified the offense or whatever down the stretch and went heavier and leaned into the run game a little bit more and kind of changed their style. I don't know if we think that's going to continue into this year. I think we're all kind of hoping they get back to the higher flying, but with these receivers going off the board and not seeing much action yet, it remains to be seen what this offense is next year. So hopefully this just provides more flexibility and a chance to be even better in those 13 personnel sets where I think they were pretty good last year, but I think they can be even better with an improvement of that third tight end.
No, absolutely. And I think as a receiver, like Irv Smith to Blake Bell, I don't want to say it's not a competition and be disrespectful to Blake Bell, but Irv Smith moves differently than Blake Bell does. He's a little bit more of a receiving weapon. You can put him into spaces that Blake Bell doesn't necessarily thrive in. So theoretically, to help the passing game, I think it makes a lot of sense if he wins out that tight end 3 job. He's in a room with Noah Gray, who's improved every single year. He's in a room with Travis Kelce, who is going to help him kind of continue to develop what he maybe hasn't been able to do, bouncing around 2 other tight end rooms with other young players, with guys that aren't quite as complete as he has been. So there's clearly a trajectory there for him to improve during this year, to become a pass catching weapon. I don't want to say concerned, but what I'm curious about is just how they use him as a blocker. I think a big part of 13 personnel is being able to block out of that, being able, if teams don't match you with heavy personnel. And the past 2 years, Irv Smith has played under 100 reps as a run blocker over the past 2 seasons. He just hasn't been used in that role. For the Bengals last year, he was 3rd on their team and blocking reps out of the tight end position. It sounds like they were impressed with his blocking early in the season, but then to Seth's point, the snaps kind of trailed off for him throughout the year. So I am curious to see how he looks, but if he can hold up as a blocker, you get more athletic. You get a better receiver out there than Blake Bell. And so we're talking about this. Okay, maybe the wide receiver room isn't quite as strong as we want it to be right now, but now we put 3 athletic tight ends out there, and you have to figure out which one's getting matched up on your linebacker or your worst coverage player. I believe that's kind of got to be a little bit of their thinking as they're going into the season.
I completely agree in terms of if you can raise the ceiling a little bit with the receivers, that just benefits everyone. That is interesting though, like the idea of being like a person for person replacement for Bell, he was there as a blocker. He was the one that was always in line. You didn't really have him lining up in the slot much. I do remember there was one target he had out of the slot last year, and I don't remember why, because it was like 3rd down too. And I remember thinking that was one of those like, come on, man, how does that happen? Like, how is that your first option? The idea that he wasn't a terrific blocker coming out. He's a little undersized. But really, he's big enough to do it with what the Chiefs need him to do. You just need to be able to catch the ball when you're open, when everyone's paying attention to Travis Kelce and Noah Gray. It's a schemed open position. This really isn't going to be a lot of anything else. And so I'm interested. It is one of those things. It's kind of funny. Like, we were joking around, before we went live and we started talking about Irv Smith. And then after about 30 seconds or so, we were like, yeah, but what are they doing at receiver? So that says something about, it's a signing that can move the needle if it allows them to operate a little more varied and trust what they can do out of 13 personnel a little more. I'm all for it, because really that 13 personnel, especially if I'm curious if Wanya Morris is the plan at left tackle this year. They gave him some snaps last year. He had some issues in pass protection, but as a run blocker, I really liked the things that he could do. He was just much more of a weird amateur lab. Sorry, I'm reading the comments again. Don't do this to me, BJ.
Good one.
Weird amateur labs. That is awesome. So the issue that I was coming around to there. Sorry, I just got so distracted by that there. With Wanya Morris, if he is their plan, I could see them leaning just a little more, he said about an Andy Reid offense, into the under center power run game, because it makes more sense with Wanya Morris, who's a better run blocker already, I think, than Donovan Smith was, which isn't a huge amount of praise, but it's there. And even Orlando Brown Jr., for such a big guy, he walled off well and that kind of stuff, but he wasn't necessarily a pile mover the way Morris showed the ability to be. So, I mean, maybe if we want to squint and look really hard at it, we could see maybe a plan moving forward. Maybe.
And I think it's just really interesting. I mean, like just the trend of free agency over the last, 36 hours or whatever. And just, it seems like NFL teams are kind of leaning more into the running game, like running backs actually starting to get paid again. Guards, all of a sudden, making absurd
a lot of money.
Linebackers and safeties. It's like building through the box again. It's like, we all kind of talk about the NFL as cyclical and everyone goes light. And, we're seeing these 2 deep shell defenses. So the way to beat that is to lean into the running game. And I think you're finally starting to see like the majority of the NFL kind of almost lean into that. And like you said, it might, we're talking about like the Chiefs running game moving forward, leaning into that more. So it's kind of interesting that, the trend of the NFL and then the Chiefs following that trend, even with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, that the Chiefs might still be kind of leaning into that and leaned into that last year and won a Super Bowl doing it. So it's just, it's wild to see. And that's kind of like my first, free agency hasn't been like that crazy or exciting or anything, but that's been the most noteworthy thing to me is just like mostly just the guards. I can't believe how much guards are getting paid. And it's kind of changed my thoughts on like, what to do with Trey Smith. I'm not really in favor of trading him right now, but it is getting interesting because I just think it's less and less likely they're going to end up paying him after next year. So it's just interesting noticing the trends of the NFL and how it affects the Chiefs and everything.
And so, in case anybody's just tuning in now, and about an hour ago, the Chiefs agreed to a 1-year deal with tight end Irv Smith Jr., who played for the Cincinnati Bengals last year. This is the Chiefs' first new signing coming in this free agent period. Obviously, it cannot be completely official and coming up until on Wednesday, but as of right now, they have agreed to terms. We mentioned something there. The market right now in free agency has been kind of funky. Tight ends are even getting paid, right? Like Colby Parkinson's getting $7.5 million per year. Noah Fant's getting over $10 million per year. So tight ends are getting paid too. I did have another idea while you guys were talking. Travis Kelce's getting a little older, right? Very great player, but he's getting older. If there is an intent to maybe reduce some of his snaps, or we all remember the Detroit Lions game when he was unable to play, you mentioned it, Seth, watching Blake Bell try to run some of those routes as the tight end 2, no longer the tight end 3, but your tight end 2, there was stuff it didn't feel like the Chiefs could do. So if there is like maybe an idea of limiting a little bit of what Travis Kelce does, I do think Irv Smith Jr. makes a lot of sense as a backup for a Noah Gray or Travis Kelce in case of injury, or in case you want to preserve some of the miles on Travis Kelce's body throughout the regular season, because his skill set aligns a lot more with those guys than what Blake Bell's did for the team last year.
Absolutely. The skills.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
What is this, amateur hour?
What? Did Briscoe tell you
I wanted to do that so bad. I wanted to do that so bad. I'm sorry. Back to the show.
God dang it. Oh, Josh, I'm not exaggerating when I say that Josh Briscoe has ruined my life. He's just a menace. Like I'm going to be like having some serious conversation with my wife tonight, and she's going to be like, let's take a break and drive away or something like that. And anyway, what was I? Oh, skill set for skill set. It is a better idea in terms of a guy like Smith. And again, anytime you do skill set comparisons, people think you're doing skill comparisons. You're not. Those are two wildly different things. No one's saying he would come in there and be able to do what Kelce does at remotely as high a level. He can at least imitate an incredibly pale, fair-skinned Minnesota during the winter comparison of what Kelce can do, which is not something Blake Bell can do. He can't run those routes. So I do like that, and I really thought Dirk made a really great point on the league trends. Too high is everywhere right now. I would love to see them keep leaning into that a little more. And with regards to, and I've got to drop out here, unfortunately, I've got court, but the idea of reducing Kelce's load, it was crazy watching him in the playoffs after sitting out. Like, I was not happy that he sat out that last week because of the history behind those 1,000-yard seasons. I mean, he was like about to surpass, he was going to become like one of like 9 people to have done so. It was just crazy. But he was so much more, well, he looked like a guy, Nate said this during Only Weird Games, all season, Kelce looked like a guy who got hurt the day before the season started, but had to play because they didn't have any other option. Because they had to give him more snaps than they wanted, and there weren't really a lot of options for him. And so the idea of load management for Kelce, that's a big deal. And if it results in him playing only 60-65% of the snaps, but playing them the way he did down the stretch in the playoffs, I mean, that's suddenly like a 2 or 3 year plan there instead of, oh, is this the last hurrah? Is this the last hurrah? So that's my last thought on it. Thank you for doing that, BJ. You're a jerk. Maddie, Dirk, always good to see you guys. I got to get going.
Joy, Seth, thanks for jumping on. He's gone.
Matt, so I pulled up I saw Kent post the stuff from your draft guide here.
Yeah.
I was just looking at, and I saw the lines dominant inline blocker. So is that something that we saw in college? I'm not sure, because you guys separate these and do kind of, I'm not sure who did this one specifically. Is this something that you saw in college, do you know, or they just have not seen in the pros so far?
Yeah, I don't think it's translated up to the pros at the same level it did in college, but that's to be expected too. We're talking about a 6'2", 240-pound tight end, roughly, is what Irv Smith has played out throughout his career. So he's going to be giving up some size. I don't think it's a lack of willingness to block. I think he's very willing. I think he is a guy that if you ask him to go in line and go block, he will try. It's just he's not the biggest of tight ends. Whereas you compare him to Blake Bell. Blake Bell's a monster out there, and not that he's the pinnacle of tight end blocking, but he's very good at it for his role. I think Irv Smith had that blocking, has it translated, but he's not unwilling to do it, if that makes sense.
I gotcha. I was also curious about Jody Fortson. I saw a tweet from like what this meant for Jody Fortson, because it kind of seems like almost like a 1-for-1 maybe. I saw that they were not tendering him. That's what Matt Derrick said yesterday. So I'm guessing, do you think this means the end of the Jody Fortson era in Kansas City?
That's the direction that I lean here. I think, I think when you're looking at this, the Chiefs are getting another athletic, pass-catching type tight end, a guy that maybe functions in as your tight end 3, but also could just serve as like this versatile backup to the other guys ahead of him. That's kind of Jody Fortson's role. Maybe you come up with some packages where you get Irv Smith out there. He kind of played as an H-back a little bit throughout college and with Minnesota. So you can find ways to use him as a weapon in the red zone or whatever it may be. So yeah, I think that's where my mind goes. I wouldn't be surprised if we see other tight end competition come in just to push the envelope at that position, but he's a guy that certainly finds a role. So, I mean, we have the Chiefs signing Irv Smith Jr. to a 1-year deal here. That is the big first move of free agency. Dirk, final thoughts on Irv Smith and what this could mean for the Chiefs going in?
First big move of free agency. Winchester not big? I don't know. Long snapper might be just as...
Sorry. The first big new addition from another team for the Chiefs this free agency period.
Huge. I just hope that it opens up some possibilities in 13 personnel, because I think the Chiefs have kind of thrived in that personnel, at least the last few years, since they've kind of changed the style of their teams in the post-Tyreek era. So I like stacking bodies up at tight end, capable bodies that can eat up snaps and kind of do everything. Hopefully he's a capable blocker of some sorts. But just to be able to lean into that personnel more and give yourself flexibility. And, something that we could have used down the stretch last year, because it kept bouncing around in my head, like just lean into the tight ends more. But then I looked at the chart and I was like, I like Noah Gray out there, so keep pushing him. And then I was like, Blake Bell, not quite excited to see him on the field, even though he's probably a good blocker. Which is something I don't always notice. But putting Irv Smith out there, another athletic body, and opening up 13 personnel more.
Yeah, especially if you want to keep passing from it like the Chiefs do. Okay, so we got one last big question here, I think. The Chiefs sign Irv Smith Jr. from the Cincinnati Bengals. Here's my question for you, Dirk. Do you think there's another move the Chiefs do today? And if so, what is it?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's the loaded one. This is the big one. This is what you're here for.
Do you got someone in mind? I need to peruse a little bit here.
You're good. I do think the Chiefs at some point in time. Well, okay, we got two things here. I think the Chiefs still have a franchise tag on L'Jarius Sneed. He's still on it. I don't know. It seems like the cornerback market's maybe not slowing down, but drying up just a little bit for him. So I think by the end of the day, we have a good idea if they are going to trade him or gonna keep him on the tag. I don't know which way I lean right now. And then I also think there's still the veteran wide receiver market starting to go a little bit, right? We've seen Darnell Mooney get signed. It sounds like Calvin Ridley is on his way back to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think the Chiefs, if they're going to make a move at wide receiver, maybe those moves spurn it. So that's where I have my eyes going for the rest of this. I don't know if there was anywhere that you thought they might be going to.
Well, there was kind of some smoke around like Curtis Samuel, so maybe have my eye there. And Josh Reynolds, like we've kind of been linked to him before, so I could see that.
Yeah.
I was kind of interested in a guy like Cedric Wilson. I think I saw you at one point say he was like a low fit for the Chiefs. How come you don't like Cedric Wilson coming here?
So I think my thing with Cedric Wilson is he's probably going to get paid a little bit more than some of the other guys based on what he did. And then he just he fit to me into a MVS type just vertical role, but maybe not having quite the same speed. Which is my general thought with it, maybe being a little extra money. But at this point, I don't think it would be a bad idea. They still need somebody to fill that role. And I think as you see more guys go, he would be one that would make sense into that. I was going to say, regardless of what happens, the Chiefs make another move today, tomorrow, middle of the night, tomorrow morning, we're here. The KCSN breaking news team has got you guys covered. We will be live. The next move the Chiefs make, we will be right here. The breaking news team, the same breaking news team that's here. Every single signing will be back here again. So we appreciate you guys. We appreciate your support and jumping in here with us. And that'll do it for the breaking news team. The Chiefs sign tight end Irv Smith Jr. from the Cincinnati Bengals.
Super Bowl.